Greetings and welcome to this edition of On the Couch, and this is the Cyber Hitchhiker. And for all those that are tuning in and listening to us on radio, we want to welcome you as we sit down for a short discussion with a man, colleague and brother in the ministry, as well as a national member of parliament. For those that know him in the political circles, we will be talking to Deputy President of the ACDP, Wayne Thring. For those that know him in the ministry circles, we will be talking to Pastor Wayne Thring from the Durban Pinetown area in KZN. And in this session, for the next 20 minutes, we are just going to get to know a little bit about who Pastor Wayne Thring is as a pastor, as a father, as a person away from politics, and get a little bit of a background of where he comes from and what got him to being Deputy President of the ACDP and why he got involved in politics to begin with. But for now, let's just get a little bit of a history behind the man, behind the MP, and delve a little bit deeper into who Pastor Wayne Thring is for the next 20 minutes. Enjoy. Who is Pastor Wayne Thring?
Yeah.
Where do you come from? Where do you stay now? Where do you call home? What schools did you go to? And maybe I might just pop in a question or two while you're busy talking.
Well, I grew up in a middle income family. Perhaps at times it was also below income when dad wasn't working. A mother who was a stay-at-home mum. Dad was a bricklayer. Grew up in a place called Sydenham, just some 5 k's outside of Durban. Born in Browns Avenue, grew up in Knight Road for the first 16 years of my life. We then moved to Newlands East, and from Newlands East we moved to Marion Ridge. Obviously all of this was during the apartheid era. The schools that I attended, I was at Sydenham Infants and then Sydenham Primary. High school, went to Ambilo, which was down in the Durban area, so we had to either cycle to school or get onto the bus. So I did much of my transport to school was cycling at the time. And from Ambilo I went to Besha High School. From Besha High School it was Besha College. I did register to go to UKZN, but Dad didn't have the funding at the time. I managed to pull together the 10 Rand registration. I remember very clearly the 10 Rand registration fee at the time,
10 Rand.
1979. I scraped it up.
I was 1 year old then, Pastor Wayne, and yet we look the same age, guys. I mean, how crazy is this?
So I scraped that up and was hoping that the funding would come for my varsity education, but the funding wasn't there. And so was offered at the time. The teachers said, look, there's another option. You could go to college and do teaching at Besha Teachers Training College. So 1980, after completing my matric, it was Besha Teachers Training College.
So you're a qualified teacher?
I am. I'm a qualified teacher. I taught for from 1984. I resigned in 1997. So taught for some 14 years, mathematics and science. So those were my
I think we're talking about the wrong subjects today. I think we should be focusing more on what you did as a teacher. So you grew up in the apartheid years. You obviously were a little bit older than me in those years because I was born in 1978. I know that people can't even remember that far back. But I was really in primary school when you were actually going into your teaching career.
Correct.
How were things? I mean, when you say you traveled on the bus to school, how were things in the apartheid years for you traveling on a bus to school? I mean, was it a mixed bus, or was it just for the colored people, or was it just for anyone that wasn't white? Did you guys have to sit at the back of the bus? What kinds of things? Because the kids that are born post 2000 now, our Gen Zs, they don't know anything about this kind of stuff, and the stuff that they do know is often skewed. So for you, what was your experiences going on the buses, and then also your teaching experience? Where did you teach as a non-white, if you don't mind me saying that?
No, not at all.
Teacher, because people don't realize that there's a big difference, even though our country is down the tubes now, and things might be a little bit reversed. But not much has really changed compared to those days.
Well, in the Sydenham area, it was a very cloistered, if I could put it that. Obviously, growing up as a from birth to about 16 years old. It was very cloistered, very protected. And it was what was then the reality for us as a kind of closed colored community.
Yes.
But as you began to mature, you realize that you've got some neighbors further up that looked somewhat like you.
Yes.
And they didn't mix with us, and you weren't allowed to actually go there. So traveling on the buses, it was predominantly black, colored, and so-called Indian folk. That we had to take a bus if we were going into town, into Durban, the city. It was then they were called Indian buses.
Yes.
And then you also had the green buses, which was the corporation buses, Durban corporation buses. So those were the modes of transport. Or you use what we would call ND10, which is using your feet. as a mode of transport if you didn't have bus fare. So as a child, I had to walk probably about 3 kilometers or so every day to school, 3 there and 3 back, or run, because where we were in Sydenham, in Knight Road, the school was right at the bottom of Randall's Road, going more towards Hippo Road, if you know, where the waste dump currently is in
Yes.
Kennedy Road. So we had to walk that distance and then walk back or run. Often when our parents had the finances, they would give us 2 cents bus fare at the time. And but with that 2 cents, you'd say, no, I'd rather save this because I'd be able to get maybe a 1 cent Coke and a donut,
Yes.
So you'd kind of save that money to get yourself a treat and rather walk to school or run to school. So that's kind of growing up. But later on, we also began to realize, as I said, as you started growing up during the apartheid era, you began to realize that there was something that was not right. We would also, as friends, would go to the beach during the school holidays, and that's where you kind of saw the segregation.
The public areas outside of your
That's
community.
where you saw, and then also when you'd go into Durban, again, you would see the segregation. There were benches there that would, say, in Afrikaans, "nie blanke nie." So that's where that's where you'd need to sit. And then there were the ablution facilities, very clearly whites only, and others, and non-whites. So then you began to realize, but why is there this segregation? So you'd see it in the restaurants. You couldn't go into certain restaurants. You couldn't go into certain ablution facilities. You couldn't take certain buses. And even if you were walking through certain areas, you kind of felt threatened.
Yeah.
If you had to walk through a particular white residence, it was almost as if you were an intruder in your own country.
Yes.
Which is what caused me in my college years, late matric year, into my college years, to join the United Democratic Front.
Okay. So you were UDF back in the day.
I was a UDF. I became a UDF leader, a youth leader. When that time now I was in Newlands East, and worked with some of the top notch members that are still with the ANC. I don't want to mention their names because I don't want to give them that unnecessary airtime. So I worked with some of the top notch guys within the UDF at the time. And now also they're with the ANC. But in 1984, when I started teaching, I gave my heart to Christ. Okay. And so I came to Christ. I picked up the phone. I called my then mentor in the UDF, who was in Newlands East, and I said to him, Trevor, I've given my heart to the Lord. I'm now in the church. I'm leaving politics behind. So from 1984 to 1995 was a period where I was being unschooled.
Yes, which is a good thing.
All of the stuff that I had picked up in my so-called rebel years and fighting against the establishment and fighting against apartheid, and in a sense it was building up a hatred towards white people.
Yeah.
And the Lord had to take all of that out and begin to put His love into my heart from 1984 to 1995.
Sure.
1995, while studying, so I in 1984 to 1995, I immersed myself in ministry. I did, street evangelism, bus evangelism, train evangelism. I got involved within the youth ministry, in the Sunday school ministry. And then I became a deacon in the church and an elder in the church and then an assistant pastor, right up until 2010, until finally I became the pastor. So one church also, 1984, that's where I gave my heart to the Lord, came to the church in 1984, and I'm still there today. So I immersed myself in ministry right up until 1995. So while studying in the local church, I picked up one of the books by Sheldon, In His Steps.
Yes.
The www. What Would Jesus Do? And I became convicted about my non-involvement in terms of transforming our communities socially, and felt the need to become, I felt the Lord impressing upon my heart to become involved politically again.
Yeah.
But this time I felt that it was going to be different. And I said, okay, Lord, if this is you speaking to me about getting involved in politics again, then you send somebody to the church. You send somebody to me. I'm not going to go out there and wave my flag, say, here I am, I'm ready now for politics. And so the very next day after I prayed that prayer, I was studying towards one of my degrees in the church, and the very next day, Brother Simon Haynes, one of our neighbors in Marion Ridge, we were now in Marion Ridge and just recently married. 1995 would have been 5 years married. And so the very next day after I prayed that prayer, Simon Haynes comes to the church and he says, hey, Pastor Wayne, the ACDP is having a meeting in the community hall. Don't you want to attend? And at first I said, Simon, I'm too busy, Brother Si. I'm too busy. I've got my exams coming up and, maybe later. And he kind of stood there. He just kind of stood his ground. He says, please, won't you come? And the Lord reminded me, what did you say yesterday?
Yes.
What did you pray?
Yeah.
And so I'm sending somebody to you. So I said, okay, Brother Si, I've got 1 hour during my lunch break. I'll come up for 1 hour. I sat right at the back of the community hall. Trish Jalbert and Gavin Stone were sharing about the ACDP. There was a handful of people, maybe 10 or so people that were there. I sat right at the back. When they finished, I thought I'm just going to run away. Gavin asked, please, the man at the back, the gentleman at the back, will you please close in prayer for us? When I opened my eyes after praying, he was standing right next to me. He invited me to the next ACDP meeting, and the rest, as they say, is history. So
okay, so that's crazy, because you know what, I remember, and this is supposedly white privilege. And I just want to say this because this is where people get the wrong idea sometimes. And that's why separating us on color and not culture is where I think society gets things wrong.
Sure.
Culturally, we're all different.
Sure.
Indians have their own culture.
Sure.
Zulus have their own culture. Xhosas have their own culture. That's got nothing to do with their skin color.
Absolutely.
And South Africa is so, even now today, so focused. I mean, I remember as a small boy growing up in a broken home with the father who was abusive. We had no money for anything, and I had to turn to crime at a very young age. Even though I was a church boy, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus back then. I was just being dragged to church by my mom because church was a thing that we had to do.
All right.
But I had to travel 15 Ks to my school. It would have been such a pleasure for me to just walk 3 Ks to my school. My mom bought me a bicycle from when I was in class 1, class 2 and said, right, you don't have to take the bus anymore because we can't afford it. There's your bike. Cycle 15 Ks to school and 15 Ks back.
Wow.
And that was the closest school I could go to.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there were non-white schools closer in my areas that I could have probably gone to, but I wouldn't have been gone there because my dad would have said to me, how can you go to a school like that because you are white and they are not white? And I remember in high school having friends, and I don't know what it was. I was drawn to the non-white people as friends. I just found white people were in those days too stuck up, walked around. And I'm generalizing here because it's not. This is just my perception, guys. My point of view, not anyone else's point of view. And I was drawn to the black guys because at the same time as me looking at them strange, they were looking at me strange. And the thing is, I was a basketball guy. I know that I'm pretty short, but I got my provincial colours for basketball. And in those days, there weren't a lot of Maybe it's because white men can't jump. I don't know.
You prove them wrong.
Yes, I had a lot of black friends, a lot of coloured friends. I spent times in the community courts that were built outside of the white areas, playing basketball on a Saturday from sunrise until sunset and then cycling home.
Yeah.
I used to walk through Ghost Town in Pietermaritzburg as a white guy, and people used to look at me and go, but Ghost Town, what on earth are you walking through there? Why are you in Copesville? Why are you in Raysthorpe? Why are you in Northdale? Why are you in well, that's where we played basketball. Mbali, section unit 13, whatever you want to call it. Even now, I don't like calling, I mean, I've been in Phoenix for 5 years, living in Phoenix, working with the Indian community. I don't like calling units, you know, and I say to all of my Indian friends, if you're living in Sanford, you're living in Sanford, it's not unit 10. If you're living in Redfern, where I have got a place now, it's not Unit 15, it's Redfern. Units are this crazy political term that they use to divide things up with. And I know that it's been ingrained in the system, but I try and say to the young guys, stop it. You live in a suburb of Phoenix. And I was shocked. I mean, when I moved into Phoenix, and I probably still am probably one of the only white guys living in Phoenix, I didn't realize, I still, you know, when they throw around the word township, location, when I moved into Phoenix, I was like, what? This is not a township or a location. This is the second largest Indian community living outside of India anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
It's just a whole lot of Indian people, the Indian businesses. The streets were clean, beautiful houses, shopping centers. And I was like, where is this a township? Come now, this is just a group of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then
it's a pity that we still have these kind of categorizations, you know, Vaughan, after you know, some 30 years of so-called democracy. By the way, when I got into that meeting, the first ACDP meeting in 1995, the two people that were presenting were white people, Trish and Gavin. And Gavin and I are still very, very close friends up until today. Trish had moved over to the UK with her husband, and she's just back now, so we're kind of connected, and we kind of more just chat on WhatsApp. But the Lord also connected me with some very, very beautiful white people like yourself.
I'm Indian inside, guys, by the way.
And I have some extremely good friends from the so-called other side of the fence, which breaks down, I think, a lot of the biases that we developed and the stereotypes that we developed as children, kind of growing up. And this is what needs to happen. And I think that as believers, we have to be intentional about breaking those biases and breaking those stereotypes. And it's absolutely amazing that you are able to go and spend time in Phoenix, and that you are able to go and spend time in Ghost Town and Copesville and so on in Pietermaritzburg. Some of the areas when we kind of just gave our hearts to the Lord, we would go to meetings in those areas.
I was doing all the nonsense there, but I wasn't doing all the good stuff.
Well, you know, but still, it's kind of breaking. I'm talking about breaking the stereotypes that, you know, you got to stay in your separate areas. And I think for me, it's sad that after 30 years, we still kind of reference, you know, the townships and the units and the black, colored, white, Indian kind of thing. We've got to break down those racial stereotypes and those racial tags. And move to a place where we are called South Africans.
Yes.
We are children.
You're not a coloured South African. I'm not a white South African or a black South African. We are South African.
We are South Africans. We are children of God. And I think that I long for the day where we are able to actually move away from those stereotypes and become who God called us to be and unite ourselves as God intended it to be. But growing up in the Sydenham area, there were some precious memories, you know, precious memories in that I was also very involved sports-wise. I played soccer. I got my colours for KZN.
So were you good? Were you as good as Reverend Kenneth? This is the question that everyone wants to know.
Well, you know, I got my KZN colours in primary school. I captained the soccer team at a school level. I was the vice captain at the local team, and thereafter I picked up some injuries from soccer and went into cycling. My brother says I was a natural cyclist. He was a South African cyclist. So I went into cycling.
I can see you being a cyclist. You've got that look of a cyclist.
Well, I've just come back into cycling. So I've completed 2 Amashovas. And my second Amashova that I did last year, second in my category. So the over 60 category in the last Amashova that I did last year. Yeah. I am over 60.
Okay.
But then I also played table tennis and captained the table tennis team. We came down from Durban up here to Belleville, where there was the inter-college sports competitions that we held, and I captained the table tennis team. So I found that, in fact, it's like with most sports that I kind of put my attention to, I kind of gravitate, and I'm able to develop if I give attention to a particular sport.
Now,
so that's kind of where I am sports-wise.
Here's a question, because now you've spoken about your history, where you come from, your years as a Christian, when you got saved, you were working as a teacher, you went to an ACDP meeting and slowly started getting into politics. Why should Christians even bother about politics?
Thank you for all of those that have tuned into the various platforms that we are on with Pastor Wayne Thring. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for those that would like to hear a little bit more about exactly what this discussion was all about, because this was just a short 20-minute intro, but we discussed a whole lot more. And for those that want to hear more and listen to the full 2-hour session, you guys can go to the Crossfire YouTube channel and you can find us there. And you can also find us on the Crossfire podcast on Spotify and listen to exactly what went down on the couch with Deputy President of the ACDP, Pastor Wayne Thring, and myself, the Cyber Hitchhiker. For now, though, it is goodbye and God bless.